So welcome everyone to today's session on data literacy demystified with Kai Analytics. I am Mary Pullen, the program director at BCCIC, which is the BC Council for International Cooperation. And over the last few months, we've held a series of peer learning sessions. So that is what today is, with one of our affiliate members, Kai Analytics, and the CEO of Kai Analytics, Kevin Chang, in which we're going to just go through data literacy. And specifically, this session is going to share insights in terms of survey and qualitative research or data collection, use, and communication. So we're hoping by the end of this session that you will have built an understanding on how to collect and process data, how to use it or apply it in terms of maybe your decision making, and data communication. So how to present data in a way that's understandable, or how to demonstrate impact in your programs. And throughout Kai Analytics, Kevin Chang will provide some practical guidance, some tips based on his 15 years experience in doing data science as well as survey research. So as I said prior to beginning this session, we have used the meeting function of Zoom, and that was intentional because we would like to have this as an exchange in terms of if you are experiencing certain challenges, you would like a little bit more information, or just exchanging on your own experiences with data. So this will be sort of not a round table, but sort of trying to have it as interactive as possible. So before I formally introduce Kai Analytics, I do want to recognize and acknowledge that the lands on which I'm speaking from today are the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And I'd like everyone to take a moment to reflect on where they're joining from, or share in the chat where you are joining from today. Just a few tips too. I think everyone has muted themselves, but if you're not talking, it's helpful just to have yourself muted so there's no disturbances or background noise. As I said, we'd like this to be interactive. So if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat that is enabled, as well as if you want to raise your hand, we can sort of queue the questions in that way. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kevin Chang of Kai Analytics, and he's got a few team members on this call as well. But Kevin is, as I mentioned, brings 15 years experience in survey research and data science. And Kai Analytics has been a BCCIC member for just over a year now, 1 or 2 years. And this is sort of an opportunity to learn from some of their experiences and some of the work that they do and some of the challenges they also tackle. A lot of this group comes from either the international development sector, and then there's a few educational institutions as well. So sort of being able to exchange on those is also part of the intent of this. So I will hand it over to Kevin.
Using Zoom for like 5 years and I still can't find the mute button sometimes. Thank you so much, Mary, for the introduction and for the invitation today. And thank you everyone for participating in this presentation. So I want to start off just with a short story. The picture here is one of the wings of the Living Word Assemblies International Church in Accra, Ghana. Although I'm not a religious person, I am fortunate to work with people of faith and faith-based institutions. And the story here is that one of my great friends, close friends from graduate school, the two of us were working on a project to collect feedback from young adults on their perceptions of climate adaptation. And we had 1 week to collect a few hundred responses. And I was getting a bit worried by midweek because we were below our target. But my friend reassured me, don't worry. Her and her team of enumerators would collect all the required responses and even more on Sunday, right after 12 o'clock noon. Intrigued, I had to ask her, like, well, what was your strategy? Like, how are we going to do this? She said, and she explained it with like the most confidence, like it was something I should have known already. She said, we're simply going to go out to all these different churches in the community and just wait outside, because come noon, they're going to be all wanting to get out and do something different. And lo and behold, they did all come out. We did exceed our goal that afternoon. And so I share this story because this is, first of all, one of my first experiences leading a global survey research project. This particular project had us covering survey in multiple countries, on the ground, online, in Africa and Europe, North America, and Asia. And since then, we have gone on to work on even more projects around the world. But I always come back to this memory because it's the one that kind of started it all. And I learned a lot from this experience. Today, there are many ways to collect information. I think everyone is familiar with Google Forms, but there are many aspects to designing a strong survey, like if following the scientific method or principle, you have to come up with a purpose, hypothesis. You also need to know your audience, determine your sample size, do statistical testing, and etc. And I think you can read a whole textbook on this subject. And for me, I still get a bit lost sometimes. But instead, I thought in our lunch time today, I can just go over some practical areas that I have learned or picked up from my years of leading survey studies. And this way, I hope you can all walk away with some points that you can implement in your own projects. Or if it comes to picking a vendor or a research partner, you'll have some ideas of what to ask for and how to evaluate them. So my presentation today is separated into two parts. I'll go over some practical tips on survey design and data collection, and then I'll share 5 considerations for visualizing qualitative data. So first, survey design. So one of the biggest challenge I see again when overseeing field surveys is dealing with poor internet connection. In some countries, internet connection is unreliable, but not only that, it can be really expensive for people. And this makes it a challenge to collect kind of long surveys online. And also, if internet is severed, which is very common too, the respondents may need to redo the survey, or they might simply give up. And it's a lot of work for enumerators as well. So what are some ways to tackle this? One way is you can continue to physically collect paper responses, but there are some challenges with that as well. Here's an example of a project where my partner and I were looking for ways to digitalize the way we can collect organic coffee certification audit information. The survey on farmer coffee lot information, pricing, transaction details, farming practice were gathered by auditors. And this process can take multiple days to do one farm, including the requirement to be a semi-decent artist, something much better than I can draw myself. And not only that, you'll have to go back and input data later, scanning PDFs and so forth. So one solution we came up with was to kind of conduct surveys using SMS or text messaging. So we found that two-way SMS surveys are a good option for areas where maybe smartphone adaptation is still limited, or internet connectivity is not very strong or widespread. And it's generally a good method for simpler surveys, shorter surveys that take maybe no more than 5 to 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes to complete. But not only that, alternatively, you can also use SMS to send a survey link to the respondents, and that could be an ideal solution for longer surveys. And the benefit with that link is they can start the survey, it's tied to them. If they lose connection or they want to do it later, they can pick it up when they're back in an internet location. There are some requirements though, if you want to send out SMS surveys. It requires your company and your company phone numbers to be validated for spam and fraud. So you do have to prepare ahead of time. Some countries can take much longer to review your application, and it may not always be suitable for surveys that the country may find sensitive, political surveys or things that they may find can cause some conflict. So there are chances too you may not be approved. And so this is on the left-hand side here is an example of kind of what a respondent will receive in a text message survey. It's basically the same survey question, but they would respond by simply entering a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or it can be good for Likert scale, and it can also accept open-ended messages. There are character limit restrictions though, so just be aware of that. Turn that off. Another option is to print out or mail out letters or use QR codes. This is ideal for areas that where smartphone adaptation is widespread. And here we have an example where we partnered with Canada Post to disseminate surveys randomly to postal codes of residents in the Comox Valley in British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And it was to gauge their understanding of food systems. So this is like a letter they would receive with a Canada Post prepaid envelope. They don't have to fill out any paper form and mail it back. It simply just facilitates the respondent to access it online. Some of you in BC might also have received something from BC Stats. And this is one that they sent out last year on the BC demographics. And so BC Stats sends out also an envelope, but instead they have a postcard with an access code and a QR code. My second advice is to keep things simple and to speak their language, the language of your sample population. This is especially true when sending out surveys in many countries. You want to keep your intro messages short and use simple vocabulary because likewise, and French and Spanish are widely used around the world, but it varies a lot in each country. There's nuances, there are idioms, and things like that. We also have Hanyu, which encompasses traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, Mandarin, Minanyu, and other regional dialects in Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, and etc. So maybe when evaluating your survey partners, just ensure that they know the local culture, they know the local language, even ones that are not written or predominantly spoken. And because respondents are trusting you with their information, and they'll be more willing to do so with someone who speaks their language. And here's an example when I mentioned even for spoken languages like of Owe, and that's predominantly used in Ghana and Togo. It's good to have it translated to be inclusive and to assist your enumerators to ensure consistency. So they're not needing to translate on the spot. And for this study on peaceful interreligious religion, which we conducted in Sierra Leone and Togo, we had the whole survey translated. So it's available in English, French, Creole as well. You'll find that many modern survey tools should allow you to load a file, like an Excel file of a translated language beside your English version, and that will allow respondents to quickly switch between the languages they feel comfortable answering in. Furthermore, browsers are now smart enough to match their language to whatever language is already available in the survey. So it's a pretty seamless experience. One more really important thing, you want to make sure to provide the language in multiple local languages, is to really ensure that people have informed consent when completing your survey. Oh, sorry. I see a question come in, and if it's okay, I'll review them all at the end. Thank you. So just as an aside, sometimes despite your best intentions, some things are still lost in translation. In a global youth climate engagement survey, our field enumerator partners in Bangladesh reported these responses from farmers in coastal regions affected by extreme weather events. So the question was, which youth groups are underrepresented when it comes to climate policies and or efforts to adapt climate impacts? And then this is what they provided. Some people put others, and they literally put unconscious people or unconscious person. And so when I was reviewing the data, my heart sunk. I thought, oh no, the partner has pulled a fast one on me, or worse, they're going around interviewing people in hospital beds. But no, fortunately, he explained it. Also, another person who explained it in a way that should have apparently been really obvious to me, and it's me that didn't know it, was that the person meant these are people who denied climate change is happening or are ignorant of climate impacts, and so they're not conscious about these issues. So yes, of course, that's what they meant. It's obviously unconscious people. One thing I would like to point out too, that so you want to make sure your language options are inclusive, and this survey was conducted a few years ago now, so some of these options are not the same ones we would be using today. But I'm sharing with you actual surveys that we have implemented in the past. Another survey tip is to check, are they paying attention to you? Are your respondents earnestly completing their survey? And one of the simple ways to do that is to just add a skill testing question right in the middle of the survey. This will help you with quality control. And this is especially important if you're incentivizing your respondents. So if you're maybe giving a gift card or you're paying respondents for completing the survey, because you want to make sure your budget, your research budget, is going towards quality responses. And I find it, just ask a question that any local person should understand or know right off the bat without Googling or anything. And even if they Google, we can catch that because we can measure how much time they spent on a question. But so you'll still be in it for a surprise though. So here's a question it's actually one of our active surveys. It's a survey of Vancouver residents, and what is the most famous park in Vancouver? So Menlo Park, South Park, Geo Milev, Stanley Park, or Columbia Park. I don't know if anyone wants to take a moment and maybe type in an answer. Or we can kind of do a simple survey before I show you the results. Granted, I think there are some folks here that are outside of BC, so. Yeah, Brienne just confirmed she's not a bot. So, but I don't know, she might be a really intelligent AI. So this question is not difficult enough for her.
That is such a compliment. Thanks, Kevin.
So see, that was a pretty robotic voice. Now I'm not sure. Thank you, Brian. So, okay. Yeah, so this is the results right now. There's in a survey we sent specifically to people living in Vancouver, 9% of people got this question wrong. One of them went so far to pick a park in Bulgaria, 1%. So you never know. You always be surprised, and at least now we know 9% of the responses is probably going to be for audit automatically. But it also means that we have to collect a further 9% to make up for our quota. And there are other methods to check for this, and I'll go over them in a later section. Another, I can't proceed. Another consideration, and a very important one, is the ethical and kind of legal protection of your local partners, your participants, and kind of in that scope to respect local norms and laws. And this is really important for conducting social research. And also, just an aside, if you are conducting social research, and those of you on government funding would already know this, the government of Canada has a free certificate program you can complete called the TCPS 2 core. And it stands for the Tri-Council Policy Statement, Ethical Conduct for Research Involving Humans. And it provides ethics guidelines and guidance, and it applies to all research involving human participants. If you're in the US, this would be like the IRB. And so I'll be sure to include it in the kind of the resources and books recommended after the session. But going back to those 3 points, when I talk about respect for your local partners, what I mean is kind of working with them every step of the way and making sure that their safety is protected, and make sure that their community is protected, and making sure that the research you're doing is also going to have a benefit to the community. That's respect for the participants means to kind of ensure not only the survey is accessible, but also safe for them to participate in. Things to discuss with your team is, can you ensure your survey is anonymous? If not, can you ensure it's confidential? Who has access to the raw data? Does the local government, the local kind of government agency want access to it? Are you allowed to give them that data? Will you be required by law to give them that data? And what's the implication of that to the local participant? Furthermore, it's important to know if you can delete that data. If the data is not anonymous, can people request to have their data deleted? And the last thing too is to make sure that you have informed consent and that they understand what they're participating in and how their data will be used. The last point, respecting local laws and norms, is another area to consider when conducting your survey or research project, because you have to adhere to the local laws and norms, and they can sometimes be different from your own. In Rwanda, in one of our research projects, although the research project wanted to segment data by different demographics, one of them included kind of understanding minority groups. But in Rwanda, there's a question you cannot ask in the country, and because the country doesn't define people in that way. Similarly, in another country, homosexuality is still a crime. So that means you cannot ask questions we ask in North America about sexual orientation or what gender or sex they identify with, or what they're. So those type of things you have to consider. Another point we've come across is whether or not your survey requires government approval. In some countries, you need the relevant ministry to approve the survey before it can be administered. And just to kind of end on a lighter note, I just wanted to share some photos of me doing a coffee traceability project that was funded by the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. So this first photo here, it looks like someone hasn't had their morning cup of coffee in the right, and this is my local partner. Now there's me not having coffee, well, and then there's me and my research partner both not having enough coffee, and then there's me having way too much coffee. But if you ever have the chance, if you're in Manila, I recommend you check out Calzada Coffee. It's a wonderful team of woman-run coffee producers and roasters, and they're doing really great work for their community. And their latest lot has been purchased by Blue Bottle Coffees in the US. And so here's, just going back, here's an example of a question. Which of the following sources are important to you for learning about climate change impacts? Learning through participation in climate strikes, protests, and civil society actions. The survey, the ministry got back to us, the Ministry of Environment, and told us that in their country, it's very peaceful and these kind of activities don't exist. So they told us that, we can remove this question. Similarly, another question which would have asked about smog and air pollution, we were also told that that doesn't exist in their country, and that we would need we can remove the question. But we understood that without removing those questions, we wouldn't be able to conduct the survey. The last point I want to share with everyone is asking open-ended questions succinctly. I think open-ended questions are a very important part of the survey process. Likert scales are powerful tools when combined with kind of empirical analysis, regression analysis, because you can understand, factors from your sample that determine magnitude and impact of your outcome. But more often than not, our research questions are on people and society, and they're not robots. And so we can't just tell people to please, for example, in that employee survey, please agree that you can manage your work stress levels well, because we know that if you can, you're 20 times more likely to agree that Kai Analytics is the best place to work. So that's why you just can't do that. So we ask open-ended questions to try to understand the why. The reason, the emotion, and the thought process behind the choices. And so that's why I've been, with all our surveys, we always incorporate, tweak, or, and with our partners, we recommend to them how they can better frame their open-ended questions. Because, guess what? When you ask good questions, you get good responses, and you're going to find that your analysis and findings are going to be so much easier to do. So here are some tips. I think ask specific questions. Don't combine them. Don't ask a question like, what did you like or what didn't you like about the event? It's better to just say, what did you like about the event and what didn't you like about the event? Ask them as separate questions. And typically, I think 2 to 3 open-ended questions for like a 20-minute survey is good. Of course, if you're doing a longer survey, you're going to need more questions, but we find that that's pretty optimal. You also want to make sure it's optional, because if people are forced to write something, you're just going to get a lot of NA, no comment, or I already talked about it. So it doesn't really add any value. So I thought maybe we could try a couple. So I'm going to show 3 open-ended questions from actual, surveys we were presented and we, advise on and implemented or revised. So these ones maybe maybe a show of hands, or if people feel this question is good as is, or it can be improved or tweaked. So I don't know if I can see hands. Or I know what I can do. Who thinks this can be? Or I'll put in a message, and then you guys, maybe you all folks can put an emoji if you think. Okay, yeah, so I think this by itself is a good question. Oh, Vera thinks it can. Yeah. Yes, I think so too. What we did for this particular question, we certainly asked that. It can be shortened, that's right. Is we changed it to just what is one change we can make to improve your satisfaction? Just encourage people to be succinct and specific with their question. Something to consider too is setting character limits. I think 200 characters, 250 characters is usually pretty good. You can leave it open, but you will get some people that will write an essay or an epic novel. So just be aware of that. Yeah, how can we improve your level of satisfaction? Those are great too. I'll go to the next one. We can come back if there's more time. This is an actual question we received as well. We were asked to analyze the open-ended response. Please share any specific feedback you have about the following services: academic advising, tutoring, career services. Now, these are not separate questions. This is just one open-ended question. Right, yeah, there's just too many sub-questions. That's right. Yes, Christine, that's your own point there too. This one's going to be a real pain in the butt to analyze, because not only do you have to kind of internalize the comment, what they're saying and what the topics are, you have to figure out which one of these are they talking about, and they're ambiguous. So even if they said, oh, the staff or the staff who addressed my concerns was great, but it took so long. You might not know which one it is. So with open-ended questions, it's best not to be greedy. If you really need to know these ones, just split it out. Have one for academic advising. It's going to make the survey really long, and so you might want to consider some sort of logic filters for each of the section to only appear if they have something they want to say about that.
As Brianne notes here,
Yeah.
maybe first identify if they have experience with one, and then you can create maybe sub-questions that branch out of that, like the logic of certain survey questions.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes too, really, from my experience, the negative responses are sometimes the ones you can really action in. So if there's a Likert scale question asking about their overall satisfaction about academic advising, maybe you only show the open-ended questions for those who answer 3 or less, just to encourage some feedback. Of course, you can alternatively collect responses just for positive if you want to gather kind of quotes that are inspirational for your staff or your team. to motivate them and encourage them with their good work. And then the next one, do you have any additional comments or suggestions? I think this one is okay, and I see this one a lot. People add it as a kind of a catch-all comment. My only feedback on this is, yeah, that's right, Bruce. It's a catch-all, and it's good to have, but it's hard to analyze. But also, if what I see too is people add this at the end after they've already asked two more specific open-ended questions. And so if you already have specific open-ended questions, it's better to just drop this question, because more often than not, from what I see, people are just saying, oh, I already answered this question, or nothing else to add. So you end up just not having really good data to work with anyways. And again, with open-ended questions, less is more, and don't be greedy. Thanks, Lorena. So yeah, now I'll transition to talking about visualizing qualitative data. So I'll transition, but oh, sorry, Lorena just passed this through to me. I've been told by my team that I have to make a small announcement. I apologize. So it'll be really short. Thank you. Kai Analytics is an international batteries included market research consultancy made up of mathematicians, developers, social scientists, designers, and communication experts. In the past 3 years, we have administered surveys in over 130 countries, working with both international and local partners. We collect on average over 18,000 responses each year. We love rolling up our sleeves to tackle data challenges and help organizations achieve their missions. But don't just take our word for it. Industry rankings put us at the top 3 in business intelligence consulting. And in 2023, we were recognized as a leader in our space. We are privileged to work with a diverse range of clients, including names like British Council, Canada Council for the Arts, and the World Health Organization. We love to connect to see how we can be a data science partner in your next project, grant application, or team training. So contact us today. Sorry about that. Now we got that out of the way. Let's go back to visualizing qualitative data. So I love working with open-ended data, actually, because I think in this era or time where everyone's talking about AI, automation, I still like the fact that, and I feel I have comfort in the fact that language is still an art, and art is inherently human. And that means regardless of the best generative model version 3.5 or 4 or whatever, we are still in control of how we express ourselves, our needs and our desires, and kind of working with that information and visualizing that is a real passion of mine. Oh, sorry, Mary. Sean's 2 questions in the chat. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, before maybe going on to the visualizing, maybe we can address the 2 questions that came up. Sean had put in the chat.
Yeah.
Around the SMS
Examples.
surveys. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, let me get it. Yeah, so there are definitely tools for that. There are SMS services. One of them is Twilio, And people actually, a lot of companies, tech companies use it for customer service support, ticketing, even two-factor authentication. But there's no reason you cannot use it to administer a survey. And I'll be happy to provide, I do actually have a list of apps and online services that I'll provide Mary to send out to everyone.
Great. And then the second question was around that they use a Google form as a survey mechanism, but have noticed that it cannot simply offer the link via Google Translate page, as the responses do not get recorded. They only seem to be recorded using direct English Google form. Can you recommend an approach for dealing with Google Forms being automatically translated?
Oh, so is the question Sean, are you trying to make sure there's multiple versions in the local language to be sent out? Okay, yeah. I think your best bet is to create multiple forms in that case. But what you can do is, although each form connects to a different Google Sheets, you can have one sheet kind of pull all those other sheets together if you want to kind of have the ease of managing it all in one sheet. So there are integrations within Google Sheets to do that. But I don't think, because Google Sheets is a free service, it's not as robust as some of the paid ones like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, where you can have that language filter. If you do have a developer, and I'll include this in my documentation, if you do have a developer, you can implement Lime Survey, which is open source. You just need a server. But yeah, I think you'll need to build one form for each language. One thing I will share though, once your data is in Google Sheets, Google has a formula where it can detect the language and automatically translate any open-ended responses for you into English. And I'm happy to share that formula with you, or point you to the page. It's a very simple formula. It's like detect language, and once it knows the language, you can just say translate from one language to any other language. It's not perfect though. It is Google Translate, but it may help you with processing or labeling your data.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Sorry.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think those were the only ones. Yeah.
So visualizing qualitative data. And so with any data analysis, the first thing is actually to check if your data is ready. Do you have enough data? Have you kind of done a quality check on it? And here are just some things to look out for. So you don't have to read the disclaimer, but this is an example of an actual survey we have sent out in the past. Sometimes we require our respondents to read and internalize or interpret kind of long form text. But here we can, on the back end, we can check like how much time they spent on a page before they said, I have read this. So you can ask yourself, can someone really read 3 paragraphs in 13 seconds? Maybe they can, but when the average people take at least 20 seconds or more, it stands out as an outlier. And likewise, then this is in minutes. If the survey is supposed to take, at least 5 minutes, if you're really quick, to 10 minutes to complete, is it humanly possible to complete a survey in less than 2 minutes? Like this person here, 1.8 minutes, even 2.7 minutes. So those are things you have to kind of consider, even though you may think that you have, the 500 responses you need. After doing some of these checks, you might have less. One other one, which I'm not able to show here, but is to check the correlations of your Likert skills. Are there too many people just answering 1111111 or 55555? And you can actually sometimes see it too. If the time to complete is short, you're going to see a lot of those high correlations. So those are kind of 2 or 3 things to look out for in your raw data before you wrap up your collection. But ultimately, you will have to make that decision with your team on what is that cutoff, what is that quality control cutoff you're comfortable with, because how much more would you need to collect to make up for it? It would it still be within your kind of margin of error? And also, do you have enough budget to restart and recollect more survey data, especially some of the more complicated surveys which involve actual enumerators and mappers to go out into rural areas. So after kind of quality checking, you can start working with qualitative data. And one thing I want to like dispel is, you need to use the latest tools or the most, the coolest version of ChatGPT. Because at the end of the day, with qualitative data, you're really presenting frequencies. You're saying how many people said this, how many people mentioned that. Within this group of people, how many people felt this way? How many people had issues with this issue, or they talked about this concern or that problem. And as an aside, we do have a manual you can download from our site that covers like sentiment analysis and thematic tagging and things like that. But I want to say is manually labeling data is totally okay. And you can do it with your team. You don't have to do it by yourself. I think if you're collecting below 500 responses, it's still pretty feasible to tag. When years ago when I worked in as a customs officer with the Border Services Agency, we had 5 officers, 6 officers sometimes clear 2,000 passengers on a cruise ship. So to me, I think with that experience, I think 300, 500, okay, I'll roll up my sleeve and kind of get to work. But you can split it up. And some people also have 2 passes. One staff goes through and tags it once, and another person goes through and tags it once, and then they see if they're aligned or not. There are also some Excel formulas you can use, which you can kind of search for keywords and automatically kind of label your comments. So that's totally okay. I think where the larger language models come into play is when you have 300 or 500 or more, like thousands of comments. Then you will want to consider using some of the newer large language model approaches. And I'll just go through kind of the basic high level theory of it, just so I'm hoping people are familiar with it and they're comfortable with having, talking to your, the vendors or software providers about how their tool is going to help you with your qualitative data. So at the essence of ChatGPT or these generative large language models is a concept called topic modeling. And topic modeling is an application of natural language processing that uses these large models that have been trained on all these texts to help researchers summarize, group, or extract key themes from large volumes of text. It breaks down words into numbers, and it determines the correlation between each word. So if you think of like birds of a feather flock together, the same thing happens with words. In theory, they have the similar concept. You're more likely to see certain words in the same sentence together than other sentences or other words. So, man and king might be, for better or worse, or woman and queen, like these type of traditional gender roles. Or man and woman if you're talking about people, and king and queen if you're talking about royal family. You'll just see those words more common together than not. Or with countries and capitals, you'll see Spain and Madrid probably more likely than Spain and London, and even more likely than Spain and Tokyo. So that's the basic concept. The thing with these language models now, they've been trained by just many, many, many iterations. So they've got all these billions of combinations of words. So you can think of it kind of like speed dating. You have, just so many rounds of meeting people quickly and try to establish if you're a good match or not. So here's an example of like a hypothetical speed date. When this person would be saying, oh, when writing a research paper is one of the most useful courses for all professionals. Yeah, and he or she will reply, the course was highly relevant for my work. I love the textbook. And the person says, the material is too dense. The textbook was okay, but it took me ages to read the articles. Now, if this is the first iteration, the model is going to try its best. It's going to go, oh, I think professional, material, and courses are together. And maybe the second topic or theme is work and articles. And the third one is love and textbook. Right. But then over time, like this is like thousands of hundreds of times, the same conversation, it'll find that there's going to be a better match. It's going to find that, course, relevant, and useful is really one topic. Work and professionals are more together. Materials, textbook, and articles are another. So you have a better match over time. So that's kind of how these models work, and they've gotten really good. They're really good at kind of understanding what you're going to type next. They're good at writing coherent sentences, whether or not the information is true or not, and so forth. But at the end of the day, you have to remember all these models are probabilistic. So even if it gets better and better, there's still a chance it will give you something unexpected. We've seen lawyers get in trouble for making fictional kind of cases, presenting fictional legal cases. Other models getting historical facts wrong. And it's because they're on a statistical model, and so there's randomness to it. But it's still pretty good at writing really grammatically sound sentences. So that's really impressive. So that's just the word. Like sometimes 40% of the time, jerk might be in topic 2, and 60% of the time, it might be in another topic. One thing I want to quickly touch on too is a lot of these models are built on existing data, and there are biases. Biases isn't necessarily bad. It's just sometimes a reflection of our society. This is a very kind of a famous word chart of an early research on gender and job titles. And when you kind of train the model on our society's information, it's going to put people who identify as male with titles like handyman, businessman, grandfather, policeman, thug, things like that. And on the other side, nurses, registered nurses, midwife, mother, maid, these type of things. And so just have to be aware that even if you get a result that looks good, there are probably underlying assumptions and biases we should be aware of. Well, I think one of the problems now is with these language models, people are in such a hurry to publish the next best model. We don't have a lot of time to really evaluate them and see them across different subjects. Another example is there's a story of a large company that was trying to build a model to predict and generate ideal vacation images for their business. And so they, this to them is an ideal vacation image. But when they tested their model, it was generating a lot of people's bedroom and bathtubs and things like that. And it turns out the people that were hired to label those data came from a country where the idea of relaxing on a remote tropical resort island is just completely out of their regular, idea. And their idea of vacation was more like relaxing at home in a bath. And so they had to redo their model and, reevaluate what the objectives are and understand, kind of go back to square one. Another tip is I think these large language models are really useful and there's great things to do, but as a researcher, especially those working with in the social sciences and collecting human responses and data, you just want to think first before using these tools, because you did work really hard to collect the data. And it also means, not, you want to think about, do you have permission to share your data? Because that's what you're doing. When you're using these cloud tools, you're sharing your data. Do you know how your data is going to be used by those companies? And ultimately, actually, at this point, they probably don't need your data anyways. They've been trained so well, but it's still, I think point 1 and 2 is really important to consider. Like, I think Adobe now, Edge, and everyone has a new button. Even I think Zoom. Hey, try our new beta, summarize your data offer. And so you just want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. The other thing to consider, even if you are allowed to share your data, the data that's going to be processing, the center, the servers that are going to be processing it might not be in the country you're supposed to be operating in. So you want to consider data sovereignty as well. Yeah, and then one time, and I was going to repeat it, but I think ChatGPT kind of corrected itself. We asked ChatGPT, what's the ending of Planet of the Apes? They explained, spoiler alert, there, Statue of Liberty and things like that. So we followed up when we asked, why is this a funny joke? So we told ChatGPT the joke. I love the ending of Planet of the Apes. The twist ending was amazing. How did those monkeys build an exact replica of the Statue of Liberty? And ChatGPT said, this is a very funny joke because monkeys lack the dexterity to build a precise replica of the Statue of Liberty. So, they're getting much better every day, but they can still give you unexpected responses from time to time. And then visualizing qualitative data. So I just want to now, at this point, I'll share with you some visual examples and some ways to present it as well. So I think word clouds are a tried and true method of visualizing qualitative data. There's nothing wrong with using word clouds, but maybe consider changing the colors. You can have some dimensions to it, maybe green. So this is an analysis of Coursera course reviews. Maybe green can represent undergraduate students and navy can represent graduate students. Consider using shades of color to show intensity along with the size of the words. And there are many web tools now. If you Google generate word clouds, there are tools that can kind of generate all sorts of word clouds for you in heart shapes, teddy bear shapes, and things like that. But just again, be aware if you're ready to give up your data to the company. Another one is using what we call a network graph to show the relationship and strength of words together. Presenting words together will give you more context than individual word clouds. And this one is generated from our tool called Unigrams. And this looks at the data we looked at was kind of what are the pros of working at Microsoft, and it uses thousands of employee feedbacks from Glassdoor. So one of them we can see right away is great culture is a big one. It's the company culture, good culture, and the benefit is also good, great benefit. But the thickest line here is probably kind of great culture. Another one, I think sometimes it's good to compare segments of your data. And this one you can do in Excel sheet. Is to use a 45-degree graph. And the way you look at this is within each group, there are these different topics. Oh, sorry, there are these different topics that have been tagged, but we can split them between the two groups across the 45-degree line. And anything that's close to the line represents that they're similarly shared. But anything that deviates from the line, either to the right or to the left, are issues or themes that are more pronounced for one group. And the further away, the bigger a bigger percentage of the issue it is. And the closer to 0, the smaller it is. So if you look at this data, if the people who have more concerns about political perspectives at their organization, 20% of people in group B have concerns about this. Oh, sorry, I should have a pen. 20% of people in group B have concerns about political concerns versus maybe around 8% of people in group A. Whereas group A, 35% of people in that group have want to have more open discussions but also protecting privacy. This is versus 30%. So this is a issue that's a little bit higher in group A than group B. And then here are just some ones that are similarly shared. Stress and anxiety at the workplace, for example, is about, I say, 6 or 7% for both groups. And then once you have your visualization or your graphs, one thing to consider is how to present it. You can present it in static reports, but it really, it depends on your audience and how they would like to receive the information. We have requests to prepare traditional and written reports with statistics and methodology. But more and more, our partners and our clients are, requesting us to prepare infographics and interactive dashboards. And so I'll share a couple with you. I just need to switch screens. Give me a second. Sorry, I can't find my window. Give me a second. I'm sorry, everyone. Okay, I think
Maybe while that's happening, if there's any questions, we can start sort of also placing them in the chat as well.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Can you all see this?
Yeah.
So this one is called like a 3D scattered graph. And this is just a video recording, but this is something we analyze. We have analyzed in the past. What I mentioned earlier about topic modeling, we're able to kind of take all those employee reviews and let the kind of statistics generate what groups are very similar. So the other thing too with the models, they know how to group words and phrases that seem similar together, but they won't be able to tell you why. So the analyst is still there, you have to interpret it. So if we look at the data here, now I might have timed out, so I have to refresh it. So yeah, so we can explore all this. It's a kind of an exploratory approach to understanding the different topics. So we look at topic 10 here. One dot represents one comment. One dot says smart people, great opportunities and great rewards. So if we go to the next dot, there are some incredibly smart people. That's another comment. Lots of smart people. So statistically, it's able to kind of put all those into one cluster. There are going to be other clusters nearby, and that probably means they share some similarity, but not quite the same. And so if we go to another topic, it'll be the same as well. Topic 18 talks about compensation and benefits. And another one too talks about great compensation above industry average. Great salary and benefits. So the closer the cluster, and the similarity of the colors, you're going to find similar topics together. Another way you can present data is using kind of a tree map. These are, again, like topics or things that are clustered together. These are all kind of good feedback for courses, the best writing course I've ever had. So you can quickly find that that is the biggest comment. I believe there's also some negative ones. So the more red it is, the more negative it can be. So tricky quiz, I guess that can be kind of negative, or some questions in the quiz for module 2 are unclear. So these are kind of issues people have with quizzes. However, the quizzes are programmed incorrectly. Yeah, sorry, I maybe make it bigger. Yeah. So this can save researchers a lot of time for it to kind of pre-group some of these topics for you. And you then just have to go in and look at 20 topics or 30 topics and have a good understanding of what people are talking about, what their feelings are. Sometimes you can find the most controversial ones. You can detect issues like workplace harassment, other unfortunate events, either at a workplace or at an event or things like that. And then we have, earlier I showed a screenshot, but we also have a tool that can help you map and visualize it as well. This, again, employee feedbacks. So this is a 2D graph, so it's less less of a computational load. And you can click on a topic and kind of see, okay, topic 2 mostly deals with great culture. Another way to visualize qualitative data is using what we call an evidence gap map. And what you see here with the different color dots, countries across the top, and themes on the left, and the sizes of circles, quickly let you know. So British Council, they conduct global youth studies on their perceptions about like the future. And this is a tool to let them know what questions are asked in what region and what country, and what areas might not be asked as much. So the location is only asked here, whereas marital status is asked in all their almost all their survey projects. Some countries have more emphasis on EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, and so, and then the total here. So that's another way to kind of visualize qualitative data. The top can be anything. It can be a study group. It can be, and the left can be kind of other thematic areas related to your research. Another thing we do is we help our clients kind of analyze public data, online news articles, social discourse, audio recordings, and kind of we can parse out key topics and people and organizations that are mentioned. We can pull out dollar amounts that are mentioned. So this is where we gathered a whole bunch of climate activity, climate initiative news articles, and we're able to quickly figure out, which of the articles talk about electric vehicles. So it filters the articles accordingly, and just for like 1 year, I think just a couple months, the articles mention up to $3.3 billion of value, and we can quickly figure out which ones are Guardian, which ones are mentions the U.S., Washington, any of these kind of proper nouns or things we can pick up on. And then the other things you can do, you can build a dashboard. This is a map to document risk in different regions. We can tie quantitative measures. Sorry, it takes a moment to load. I loaded this early, but I talked too much. Sorry, guys, I talked too much. Sorry, everyone, I talked too much. So everything's timed out. This is my fault. Oh, sorry, I have to pick a region. So you can pick a region and you can tie qualitative information alongside quantitative information. Just one thing with working with borders, if you have international partners, you just want to make sure there's like sensitive issues are not presented. So this area is there's conflict in this area, and so we do have to do things to mask areas. So the focus is on about the people and the disasters, and not about is the border 50, 100 kilometers left or east or west, one way or the other. Yeah. I think I'll stop sharing this and I'll go back to my thank you page. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending and thank you for your questions. And I'm happy to answer more questions. Yeah, you're welcome, Brianne.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, no, that was excellent. It provides a lot of tips along the way.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you.
Let's see if there's any question. If somebody has any questions, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself.
I can't see, I'm not able to see faces when I'm presenting, so I'm not sure how to bring the cameras back up.
Nobody's camera is really on, Kevin. But
Oh, okay,
if you wanted to see people's names with the black boxes behind them, I think it's on your top right-hand corner. It's
Yeah,
like the
the
view
view.
options.
Yeah.
But no one's camera's on anyways.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe what I'll do is there was a question at registration by one of the registrants that I think could apply to a number of different organizations that are on this call. Is the person was just asking about, they work in largely rural areas, and if you have any thoughts on what's the best way to create a sample in a small rural area, because what they end up having is a lot of opt-in participants, which is a group of sort of the listening and willing. So yeah, if you have anything in terms of if you were to do sampling of rural areas, I know you've done some survey research in rural areas specifically. So if you have anything, any tricks around or tips on that.
Yeah, I think one thing we did successfully in a rural area is just connect to the rural areas Facebook group page. The people are active there, and as long as you have one member, introduce you, invite you, they're happy to kind of participate in that. So we had a lot of success there. But also, if you only have a few samples, going into a detailed kind of interview and analyzing their response, like a 30 to 45-minute interview, you can transcribe those, and then that's your qualitative data, and you can gather themes from that as well.
Great. And Sean, I see you raised your hand.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Kevin.
You're
I
welcome.
have a question about ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So my assumption would be if I had a large set of qualitative data and I wanted to do some form of sentiment or topic analysis or modeling, my assumed approach would be to upload an Excel sheet with all of the data in it, and then just ask ChatGPT to add a row providing some sort of topic modeling, identify the common topic for each of these rows, and then spit out the results and give me the Excel sheet back. Is that workable, or can you recommend some other approaches?
Yeah, yes, you can certainly do that. You need to kind of script it a little bit so that it knows how to process and return your cells. So you can certainly ask it to, tell me which of these comments are positive or negative. You can tell it to summarize a whole bunch of comments and just give you like a Coast Note version. But you can also, there are a lot of kind of packages that researchers have published. They're open source packages that you can quickly implement to do sentiment analysis and topic modeling. We do have some basic ones that you can try out, and you don't have to install anything. You just kind of run a scripted like code, and the data just belongs to you. It doesn't go anywhere. So I can share that with you as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, there's a lot of really good, bright researchers we have partnered with in the past that that we are putting out new models, new packages, new libraries that are pretty robust too. Yeah.
I do have a second question if I have
Sure.
The opportunity to ask that. So, we also like to develop sort of longitudinal case studies of programming. And we definitely try and get an idea of like the socioeconomic improvements or outcomes of particular households over a few years. But it's not always easy to get back to the same households.
Oh, okay.
And so, ordinarily I would use a proxy household. So, based on the geographical area, I would assume that they're probably experiencing similar things. But in the case where we're looking at livelihood advancement and somebody's getting some economic development happening, that can also happen significantly differently based on households in the same village, for example.
Right.
So I'd be curious to get your sort of ideas or approaches on how to deal with that.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think first I'll need to understand like what the outcome is. Is it just income? Is it like community income? Is it investment in infrastructure? Like if the households are moving, maybe you look at it at a community level, and maybe there are property. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, I thought you might be asking me the question. So, but you're not. You
Sorry?
No, so I mean, I got confused. I thought maybe you were asking me the question, but we are obviously interested in the socioeconomic improvements per household, and we would generally sort of be looking at sort of proxy indicators of that. So have you gone from a mud roofed residence to now a brick walled residence? What kind of roofing do you now have?
Okay.
Do you have motorbikes in the house? Do you have a television? Do you have a radio? That kind of stuff. So
yeah. Yeah. So I wonder, even if the household moved out, you could still measure the improvement on that property. You might even consider kind of aerial photography and just kind of measure improvements in the community household by household, regardless of who's living inside or not. You can look at road improvements, installation of new lighting, those type of things over time. Those are things that are possible now too, and you can, if you have those images, you can train the images to detect those kind of changes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and it depends on the kind of the legal system in place. There might already be property deeds and things. A lot of these governments have now participated in open data initiatives, and so those tax records and things are available to analyze.
Great. Are there any further questions from the group assembled? So if not, yeah, no, this has been fantastic, Kevin. I think we at BCCIC usually send out surveys after these events, and I think I'm going to be reflecting on how we structure our surveys, and yeah, how to use that then when we do reporting, and through some of the insights you provided around visualization and sort of being able to communicate data in various ways. So this has been, I think, a really great opportunity to learn from Kai Analytics, some of the tools that would be useful for the work of those in the international cooperation sector, as well as other sectors. So I would just like to thank you very much for the presentations, the tips and guidance that you provided. And just in terms of, how to use data meaningfully and in a principled way, I think is really important, particularly when we're looking at wanting to ensure that data is not extracted from communities, but it is a process where it is driven by the community needs and as you were noting, sort of based on community languages and local insights into specific areas or ways of discussing these topics or the topics of the program with the communities in question. So thank you very much. And yes, I would like to extend a thank you to all those that were part of this session, and hope to see you in the future at other BCCIC events. I will, as I mentioned, will be sending a post-event survey, so we'd love to hear your comments and feedback and just how the session went. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me, Mary.